Alright, so they want us to classify these carbons as first or primary, secondary, tertiary, or quaternary, and then do the same thing with hydrogens, but just from primary to tertiary. So what I'd like to do is just go ahead and draw this out in like the bond line because I don't know, looking at this is kind of hard for me to see what's happening. So we have carbon, 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 carbon. So this carbon on the end has 3 hydrogens attached to it. Then we have 1 hydrogen on either side here, 1 hydrogen, or 2 hydrogens on this, and then 3 on the end here. So now let's go ahead and identify the carbons first. So to determine whether a carbon is going to be, or what is going to be, we look at how many carbons are attached to it. So this first carbon here, we see it only has 1 attached to it. So this is going to be a primary carbon. The carbon next to it, well, it has 2 carbons attached to it, 1 on either side here. So this is going to be a secondary carbon. This carbon here, same thing as that one. Notice how it has 2 carbons attached to it. So this is going to be secondary. And then on the end, this is just like the one we had at the very start. So this is just going to be primary because it only has this carbon attached to it. Now for the hydrogens, what we're really doing is saying what kind of carbon it's attached to. So after we've named all of these, we can say, okay, well, all the hydrogens attached to this carbon are going to be primaries. So primary, primary, primary. These two are attached to a secondary carbon, so these are going to be secondary as well. Secondary, secondary. These two also secondary, and then the ones in the end all primary. All right. Now let's come over here. Actually, let me draw that a little bit better. So we have this here. Now let's go ahead and identify the carbons first, and then after that I'll draw in the hydrogens for us. So notice how these 3 carbons, all on the end, are only attached to 1 carbon, is this central one right here. So all 3 of these on the end are going to be primary carbons, so primary, primary, primary. And likewise, these 3 on the end here are all attached to this one, so those are all going to be all primary as well. So primary, primary, and primary. Now for the hydrogens, well, the ones on the end, or actually I forgot to do these 2 carbons right here. So notice how both of these, so this one here, it has 1, 2, 3, 4 attached to it. So this is going to be a quaternary carbon. And then same thing over here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 carbons attached. So this is also a quaternary carbon. Now for the hydrogens, I'll go ahead and just put these in blue. So the ends should all have 3 for all of these. 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, and then 3 over here as well. All right. And then these middle 2 carbons aren't going to have any hydrogens attached to them because they already have 4 bonds, and carbon doesn't want to make more than 4 bonds. And we'll now notice all of these hydrogens are only attached to primary carbons. So instead of me actually listing out primary for every single one, I'll just say off on the side, all hydrogen are primary. All right. Now over here. So remember, the way we would read this is saying we have 3 methyls attached to this methyl here. So it's like we have CH, and then we have, actually, let me scoot this down a little. So we have CH, and then we have 3 carbons with all hydrogens attached. CH, H, and then CH, H, H. All right, so let's figure out how many carbons each of these carbons have attached. So this carbon here only has that one, so this is going to be a primary. And then notice same thing for these ones on the end as well. Both of those are going to be primary because they're only attached to that central carbon. And then this central carbon, well, it has 1, 2, 3 attached to it. So this is going to be a tertiary. And now for the hydrogens, remember we look to see what kind of carbon is attached to, and then it just takes that name. So this hydrogen over here attached to the tertiary carbon is going to be tertiary, and then all the other hydrogens are all going to be primary, since all of these are attached to primary carbons. All right. And then over here, let me make this a little bit bigger. So first let's identify the carbons, and then again from that we can just figure out what the hydrogens are going to be. So this carbon here, so it has 1, 2, 3, 4 carbons attached to it, so this is going to be a quaternary carbon. And from that we also know we're not going to have any hydrogens attached to that. For here, this has 1, 2, 3 attached to it. So this is going to be a tertiary carbon. This carbon here knows how it's only attached this carbon, and same thing with this, only attached to that carbon. So both of those are going to be primary carbons. And then same thing with this one, this is only attached to that carbon, so this is going to be a primary carbon as well. And now notice how the rest of these are all going to be attached to 2 different carbons. So these are all going to be secondaries. So let's just go ahead and fill the rest of those in with secondary. All right, and so now we can go ahead and draw in the hydrogens. So this should have 2 hydrogens. This should have 2 hydrogens. 2 hydrogens, 2 hydrogens. This is only going to have 1 hydrogen, and then on the end here, these are all going to have 3 hydrogens. So again, remember, we look to see, oh, and I almost forgot this one over here. And so again, we just look to see what kind of carbon it's attached to, and then it adopts that name. So the ones on the end here, these are all going to be primary hydrogens. This one, since it's attached to this carbon, is going to be a tertiary, and these are all primary. And then the rest of these, notice how they're all attached to secondary carbons, so these are all going to be secondary hydrogens. All right, so just to kind of review what we did again, so to figure out what a alkene's carbon is, we just look to see how many other carbons are attached to it. And then for the hydrogens, we just look at what kind of carbon it's attached to. So maybe I'll just write this down here. So primary carbon, this has 1 other carbon. Secondary has 2 other carbon. Tertiary, 3 other carbon. Quaternary, 4 other carbon. And then for the hydrogens, actually let me move this down. And so for the hydrogens, it's just attached to that kind of carbon. So primary hydrogen attached to primary carbon, secondary hydrogen attached to secondary carbon, tertiary hydrogen attached to tertiary carbon, and then we can't have a quaternary hydrogen because carbon already has 4 bonds. So that's how that's why we don't actually have that classification.